Hello, my name is Arth McGowan-Plant, and I'm the Executive Director with the Center for Social Science Research at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. One of our center's mandates is to provide public policy talks to the community, and we're very happy today to have the opportunity to speak to Dr. Royce Koop. Dr. Koop is the Associate Chair and Professor with the Department of Political Studies here at the University of Manitoba. His research spans several topics, including themes related to representation and political parties, both within the Canadian and comparative context. We are fortunate to hear his perspectives today, particularly on Canada's upcoming federal election, which is going to be held on Monday, April the 28th. This is when we elect members to the House of Commons, which will be for the 45th Canadian Parliament. Please note that before we begin, the answers that Dr. Royce responds to my questions are to reflect his political expertise and opinions, and do not necessarily reflect those of the Centre or the University of Manitoba. So thank you, Dr. Royce, for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you here and to share and to hear your ideas and perspectives on the upcoming federal election in Canada.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I have several questions I'd like to ask you, but I'm also going to leave some time at the end of the questions to allow you the opportunity to add any additional perspectives or things that you feel people need to know for Canada's upcoming election on Monday, April the 28th.
Sure.
So let's begin. The first question: what should Canadians know as they prepare to go to the polls on April the 28th?
Canadians should inform themselves as much as possible about the different policy stands of the candidates, about the personalities and the experience and the attributes of the different leaders and the people running for office. In Canada, we vote for a candidate, but that's also a vote for a party. And so I really encourage people to learn as much as they can. You know, if you're already a partisan, if you already know who you're going to vote for, that's great. You should vote. But if you're not totally sure, if you're standing on the fence, then I think people should do their own research. You know, you should learn about the parties, learn about the leaders. Don't always rely on other people to tell you what they think. It's a little ironic for me to be saying this right now, but don't always rely on media sources, on people that present themselves as authority figures. There's lots of opportunities to learn about the candidates yourself and learn about the parties yourself. And I really encourage people to go out and do that and vote in a way that best kind of reflects your own interests and your own preferences and what you think is important, not what other people think is important.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Appreciate that insight. If people were to want to find more information about the candidates in their particular district or riding, where would they get that information?
The easiest way is just online. All the parties have websites. You can go and check out what their policies are. Social media is a little less useful. Like these are politicians presenting the kinds of messages that they want, but certainly look at the policy proposals of the different parties. It's easy to learn about the leaders, their background, their experience, where they come from. All these things factor into people's votes, and so it's a very different world now. All sorts of information is easily available to individuals so that they can make their own choices. The role of intermediaries in places like the media is less important than it used to be.
Okay, thank you very much for the information. Appreciate that. The next question, what do you think are some of the main issues for voters? What is that you think they should know on this upcoming election?
Yeah, well, we can look at polls taken during the election to find out what the top of mind issues are for Canadians in this election, and might actually be surprising when people read those kinds of polls. You would think, given the attention that's being paid to this issue by the media, by people that write commentary columns, that Donald Trump and tariffs and the kind of the threat of annexation and the 51st state, those would be the top of mind issues for Canadians, and they are important, but they're actually not the biggest issues that are on Canadians' minds. The biggest issue is inflation, cost of living, home prices, actually the things that have been on Canadians' minds for a few years now. The big concerns haven't shifted. And so your question was, what are the big issues? Those are the big issues. And what should we be thinking about? I don't really want to tell voters what they should be thinking about, or what they should see as important. I think people should make their own decisions about these things. But we just know objectively that inflation, cost of living, some of the real challenges that have arisen in daily Canadian life in the last few years are still top of mind issues for Canadians.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and certainly, as you suggested, I think economics is certainly on the minds of most Canadians now, given, as you suggested, about inflation and housing and other issues like that. You also, though, in your response mentioned President Trump. So I just want to jump, if I may, to that question for a second.
Yep.
Certainly this has presented a different opportunity and challenge for the federal election, given the situation that's been occurring in the past several months from the United States. Would you suggest that President Trump has impacted this federal election? And if so, can you comment on how you think it's going to impact the election?
Yeah. Yeah, it has massively so. I think that when you're familiar with Canadian electoral history, you know that once every few decades we have a big election. Some of the most exciting elections in Canadian history were focused on the Americans, or focused on trade issues, focused on threat of the Americans in some cases. And it hasn't been since the 1988 election, the big free trade election, that we had a real election campaign focused on the Americans. So for most Canadians, this is a brand new experience, having an election campaign where we're doing this in the shadow of the Americans. And so what we have seen, the impact that we've seen Trump exercise on Canada, is that he announced tariffs, he withdrew them. He's spoken quite frequently about the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state. And so that has rocketed up in terms of the importance that Canadians attach to that. And one of the questions that Canadians are asking is, who is the leader that is best suited to confront this threat? Who has the experience, who has the capabilities to actually protect Canadians' interests against what seems to be a real threat? Now, at the start of the campaign, the Liberal Party had a new leader, that's Mark Carney, and an awful lot of Canadians decided pretty quickly that Carney he fit the bill. He was the man to stand up for Canadians' interests against Donald Trump, given his experience, given a very long record of experience and relevant experience. And so what we've seen is that as the issue of Trump increases in salience, as it becomes more important to Canadians, Carney and the Liberal Party benefit. But when Trump recedes from view, he didn't mention the 51st state for a few weeks. That benefits Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, because the Conservatives do better when Canadians are focused on those cost of living, those domestic economic issues. So one of the big things, I think, is, are we going to hear from Trump between now and Election Day? If we do, we did just a day ago in response to a question from a CBC journalist to a Trump spokesperson. But if we get more rumblings from Washington talking about Canada as the 51st state, that will certainly help the Liberal Party and Mark Carney. It has already had a big impact. It could have an even bigger one as Election Day approaches. Whereas if things are relatively quiet on that front, if Trump is preoccupied with China, he's not paying attention to Canada, that's going to help the Conservatives. It's going to draw attention away from that and back to those domestic economic issues that actually help Poilievre and the Conservatives.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing that perspective and those insights. I think that's very helpful. And just following up with a question like that, do you feel that there are other issues that have not been included on the different political parties' agenda that should be considered? You mentioned some of them, certainly sort of a refocus on some of the economic issues, But for example, with the Liberals or the Conservatives, the NDP Green or the Bloc Québécois, which are the five major parties that were in the Parliament prior to its dissolution,
Yeah.
do you feel there are other issues? Of course, you mentioned, of course, the neighbors to the south with President Trump and the economic issues, but there are other things that also should be dominant on people's minds, or things that they should be aware of.
Yeah, so in an election campaign, there's issues that people like me or like you might want to see discussed, and yet they don't come up. They get swamped by other issues. And so the issue of Trump and tariffs, it rocketed up in importance. It just kind of swamped a lot of other issues that, I personally think are important, and that other Canadians, they might think that other issues are important as well. There are a few things that we should be talking about, and they come out of the legacy of Justin Trudeau's Liberal government. He was in power for almost a decade, and there's a lot of stuff there that I think Canadians are grappling with, that are getting swamped by the Trump issue in this current election. First one is the deficit, the debt and the deficit in Canada, very high. It's something about which there's going to be a reckoning at some point. We haven't had a real period of fiscal austerity in Canada since the 1990s under a Liberal government, Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. It really feels like with the extent of federal government spending right now, the size of the debt, the size of the deficit, we're heading towards austerity. No one seems to be talking about that, and that's a real concern. Concern that I have is about federal-provincial relations in Canada. I think that relationships between the federal and the provincial governments are at an all-time low in Canada right now. It's been a very long time since we've had the kind of hostility, the kind of antagonism between the federal and the provincial governments that we have now. We have this kind of long period under Trudeau's government in which the federal government was injecting itself into provincial jurisdiction, using the federal spending power to do things that it really shouldn't, under the Constitution, have been doing. And fixing those relationships, bringing about better working relationships between the federal government and the provinces is something that I think is very important. There are big issues. The expansion of the assisted dying regime in Canada, MAID, is something that I focused on. It's something that there's been real errors, and a lot of people feel that it has gone too far. It's gone further than it was originally envisioned. An election is a time when people should be able to render judgment on that. They should be able to vote in part on that basis, but we've had really no discussion at all about MAID. It's just been completely swamped, despite that it's an important and pressing issue in this campaign, in this country.
I really appreciate hearing those different perspectives and those ideas that, as you suggested, that are not necessarily being represented or heard.
Yes,
right, from some of the political leaders.
Yes, and as we said at the start, just because I'm saying that doesn't mean these are objectively important issues, although I personally think they are. But of course, other people are going to have different views, and the views of everyone else are just as valid as mine.
Okay, well, appreciate that. Just following from that as well, you mentioned, of course, with the former Liberal government under the leadership of the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Can you comment, though, on the leadership of each main political party now? And as I mentioned, that would be the Liberal, Conservatives, the NDP, Green, and the Bloc Québécois. Those were the five political parties that were represented in the Canadian Parliament prior to it being dissolved, of course, to the call of this election. Can you just comment briefly on some of the similarities or even differences that you see in and among those different political leaders?
Yes. So Carney is the interesting leader, because he's a fresh face. This is someone that was connected to the previous Liberal government. He was an economic advisor to Justin Trudeau, but in this campaign, he's tried to present himself as someone that's new, fresh face to Canadians. And in fact, in the French language leaders debate, he was getting questioned about his role in the last government. His response was, "I just got here. I just arrived. I'm new." Well, that's kind of maybe half true. The reality is that Canadians like Carney. They like what they see. Usually, politicians come onto the scene They can have quite positive evaluations. People like what they see, and then as time goes on, they wear out their welcome and their approval ratings go down. For Carney is so new that Canadians are willing to give him a shot. They're willing to give him a chance. They like the fact that there's this kind of fresh face in the race, and so we see that reflected in polling. His personal approval ratings are quite high. Now, they're probably going to go down between now and election day. That's what I expect. They certainly go down if he's elected and he serves a term as prime minister, but right now he's well liked. I think in part as a result of his experience, his credentials, the moment that we're in with the threat of the Americans. And he has he has an approach when he speaks that is not typical of a politician. You know, he's pretty green when it comes to politics, and that shows, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes people like that. They like it, the unpolished approach. Pierre Poilievre is a real contrast to Carney. He is an extremely experienced and effective politician. He's been a member of parliament for 20 years. He won the leadership of the Conservative Party with a crushing margin of victory. And he's been an outstanding leader of the opposition. He really effectively held Justin Trudeau's government to account. Oftentimes it was a bloodbath and question period watching Poilievre just kick the stuffing out of these Liberal ministers. The problem is that approach doesn't always translate well into an election campaign where people are not electing an opposition leader, they're electing a prime minister. And so what we've seen in this campaign is a presentation on the part of the Conservative Party of a more personal side of Poilievre, his family, and I think a softer side. The edge is less sharp, and I think that helps him. That will help him a great deal. And so we have more interviews with him talking about his family, talking about his kids. In the leaders' debate, he was much less sharp than in question period. I think that will help. That'll help him, and it'll help the party quite a bit. Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, is in very rough shape. The NDP is very far behind in the polls. They're facing disaster in this election. We have to go all the way back to 1993 to see the NDP in as rough shape as it is right now. They almost certainly will lose official party status. And the leaders have to be accountable for that, and Jagmeet Singh will be. The reality is that Justin Trudeau had a minority Liberal government, and for years it was propped up by Jagmeet Singh and the NDP. And so he did that while Justin Trudeau was tanking in the polls for long enough for the Liberal Party to recover, and now his party is facing electoral oblivion. And so, we can see in the debates, Singh is quite feisty. He needs to fight for the survival of his party, but really he has to be accountable for the situation that his party finds itself in right now. Bloc Québécois is not sure. I don't know a whole lot about Quebec politics. I'm not sure about that. And the Green Party these parties are getting squeezed. Well, the Green Party in particular is going to get squeezed. It's going to get obliterated by the electoral system. They may not elect any MPs in this election, whereas in the last few elections they've elected 1 or 2 or 3 members. I think they're probably going to get wiped out in this campaign.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. Very interesting perspectives on the different political parties within Canada.
And of course, leaders in Canada are very important. They always have been. Going way back into the 1800s. Great observer of Canadian politics, André Siegfried, wrote that you didn't even need a party platform. Just the name of the leader could substitute as a party platform. Macdonald, Laurier. And so leaders have always been very important in Canadian politics, much more so than in most democracies. And so a lot hinges on the appeal of the leaders, and that's going to be as true here as it ever has been in Canada.
Yes, I would agree with you. And just like you suggested, in terms of names of political leaders, throughout Canadian history, we all know those different names. And similarly with this current election with Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre, and those are names that are going to, of course, lead us into this federal election, and based upon the results of this election, determine who the next prime minister is, whether it be, of course, Mr. Carney or Mr. Poilievre. You'd mentioned throughout your responses to the questions about some of the unpredictability or instability, of both the economy right now as well as Canada's political environment. Would you have any suggestions to share with us, and also to also provide to Canada's political leaders in terms of how to move Canada through this unpredictability, whether it be the tariffs that are coming or being imposed on us by our neighbors to the south, or just in terms of, as you mentioned, the debt and deficit, the housing situation, other issues that certainly are on the minds of all Canadians right now. What would you have to suggest to Canada's political leaders about how to respond to these issues?
Advice to Canada's political leaders, and it's just my view, is you have to kind of focus on fundamentally important issues, even when it's uncomfortable to do so. The reality is that every few decades, the Americans go through a period of protectionism, where they decide that they're not going to be the best trading partner in the world, and Canadians get themselves, I think, kind of into this sense that we're always going to have special access to this giant market, to this giant trading partner. That's just not true. And really, the situation that we're in now, where we're confronting tariffs, where we're discovering that actually the Americans aren't a reliable partner in some ways, is something that our leaders should have been preparing for 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, not right now. How do you prepare for that? Do you ensure that Canada has access to markets other than the United States for its product? That comes back to the question of pipelines. Do we actually have the ability to export energy products to Europe, to Asia, anywhere other than the United States? And for the last 10 years, more like the last 20 years, we've had these big debates about pipelines. Quebec, the problems in Quebec has been an obstacle to pipelines. And I think that this situation with the Americans is demonstrating that really a lot of the things that we thought were up for debate that would be nice to have, they're not really nice to have. We need to have that kind of infrastructure, that kind of economic development, the sort of resource development that is going to get us through these tough times with the Americans. And so I think these sorts of infrastructure issues are going to be very important in the years ahead. And I'm going to be looking to see if leaders are committed to that sort of development. Are they committed to the development that's going to get us through tough times with the Americans when they come, because they will inevitably come.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And certainly, as you suggested, with these complexities and the challenges that Canada is facing right now, and how the different governments are going to respond to these challenges, I think will prove very interesting after the election. My last question, or maybe commentary, is that if you'd like to add anything in addition to what I've asked, or if you feel that's something that people really need to know before going to vote on the 20th of May.
Yeah, it kind of adds on to the last question. I think it's very easy for some of us to look at cost of living issues, and look at inflation issues, and see it as a set of numbers. Oh, the rate went down by 0.02, that's great. It went up, that's bad. But of course, where this really plays out is in the lives of everyday Canadians. And it doesn't take long when you're out in public in this country to see that a lot of people are suffering. A lot of families are suffering. There's a cost of living crisis in this country. And I really wish leaders would focus on that and stay focused on that, because the experience of inflation or this cost of living crisis plays itself out in people's lives. It's not just a set of numbers. And so if I can underline that for politicians, that's what I would do.
Great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to answer my questions and to share your perspectives and opinions with everyone today on the impending upcoming federal election. I said on Monday, April the 28th. And just before we leave today, I just had a few notes I'd like to share with you. The center will be hosting a free online pre-election forum on Wednesday, April the 23rd from 6 to 8 p.m. If you're interested in attending this free event, please go to our website and you'll be able to get further information there, as well as to register for this important event. Dr. Koop will be part of that pre-election panel, as well as several other people, and they'll be responding to questions as well. And you're also able to ask questions to them at the end of their website for more information on that. And also, I've been saying repeatedly that, of course, the federal election here in Canada is going to be held on Monday, April 28th. But for those of you who are unable to attend for any reason, there are other options for you to be able to cast your vote and your ballot. Right now, upcoming, there is the advance polls. In Canada, the advance polls are going to be held for 4 days. On Friday, April the 18th, Saturday, April 19th, Sunday, April 20th, and as well on Monday, April 21st. So if you are unable to cast your vote, as I said, on the 28th, please take advantage of the 4 days. And those polls are held over a period of 12 hours from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I would encourage you to take a look at your voter information card. You should have received that previously. And on that voter information card provides you with the location, the times of where those advance polls are. As well, if you require assistance, there is a phone number on that voter information card that you can call, and they'll provide you with support on election day or at the advance polls. Otherwise, if you are not able to vote at the advance polls or the election day, there's also something where you can vote by mail. The date to register for that, though, and that's through Elections Canada, is on the 22nd of April. So please go into the local Elections Canada office to be able to register for that special process, or alternatively go online and register there. The website for that is www.elections.ca. And again, I just want to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Koop again for answering all of my questions and taking the time to share your perspective and opinions. I'm sure everyone today has been able to get a bit more knowledgeable and a bit more experience with the federal political process. Thank you again, and please don't forget to check us out on Wednesday the 23rd at 6 to 8 p.m. online. And if you really enjoyed watching this video, please like this video or subscribe. Or if you have any other questions to the Center for Social Science Research and Policy, I encourage you to reach out to us at cssrp@umanitoba.ca. Thank you so much again for taking the time and sharing your time to listen to what the Center has been able to provide on the upcoming federal election. Thank you.
You